Thank you very much for attending. My name is Jeff Morris, and I'm the Learning Content Developer for Ascent, the Center for Technical Knowledge. And on my plate is basically the infrastructure suites. So that includes Civil 3D, Map 3D, and Infraworks, as well as Navisworks and BIM 360. For a long part of my career, I was working with a variety of Autodesk resellers as a infrastructure application engineer, where I conducted a lot of Civil 3D classes using the Ascent courseware. And prior to that, I was a CAD and a BIM manager for a variety of both architectural and civil firms, mostly multidiscipline firms, from small 5-person firms up to large multidiscipline international firms, as well as federal public works departments in Canada, the US, and Kuwait. So in this webcast, I want to show you the changes in the file structures that I've implemented in the 2021 courses for the Civil 3D data sets. And I want to look at some major changes that happened in the Civil 3D Fundamentals courses for 2021. I reorganized the chapters. We're going to be discussing the other 2 Civil 3D courses, which is Survey and Grading. And then we'll wrap up with looking at what I have planned for the Infraworks course and the Navisworks course. So the Civil 3D 2021 Fundamentals course for both Metric and Imperial has been released. The Civil 3D 2021 Fundamentals for Surveyors, I believe, has also just been released. And the Civil 3D Fundamentals for Land Developers, which used to be the Civil 3D Grading course, is due to be released in about a month's time. I'm a little bit ahead of schedule for that, so we might see that at the end of June, early July. For the Civil 3D 2021 Fundamentals course, both in Metric and Imperial, I changed the folder structure to mimic a more professional civil project, either working within your own office on a local area network, or outside of the firewall, you might be housing it in a BIM 360 project on a BIM 360 hub. So the folder structure has been changed to mimic the type of professional folders that you would find within a typical project. I reordered the chapters within the Fundamentals course to emulate a more realistic workflow. I expanded the pressure pipe content of the course, and at the end of the course, I introduced some visualization tools. When I was a trainer, I always liked to end the course on a high note, and therefore I introduced in the last chapter the multi-view blocks and some visualization so the students can leave feeling really good about it, hopefully. So I would highly recommend that anyone teaching the 2021 Fundamentals course, that they get familiar with the data set and that they look through the course in terms of how the chapters have been reorganized. For the Civil 3D 2021 Fundamentals for Land Developers, that's a mouthful, which used to be known as the grading book, we gave it a new guide, which I'll be explaining shortly. Okay, so let's start with the folder structure. Prior to 2020, for the Fundamentals course, all of the data set went in a Civil 3D projects folder. Underneath that, all that contained was a Civil 3D training folder. And within that were a variety of folders relating to the various chapters within the book, but they also contain the images, they contain the XREFs, they contain the spreadsheet for the bid sets, survey databases were within that. So with 2020, with the 2020 data set of last year, I introduced a configuration folder. So I moved a lot of the configuration files that were strewn throughout the Civil 3D training folders, and I moved them into the variety of configuration files outside of the data set. So that it emulates what you will find in within a professional organization where all these configuration files reside somewhere on the network, safe in a different location, locked away. Within 2021, I renamed the Civil 3D training folder to working folder, and I introduced an expanded configuration file, as well as, well, I'll get to that shortly. And in that expanded set, I moved the data shortcuts into the configuration files. I moved the images to the references image folder. The original drawings that contained all of the XREFs, I moved into the references DWG folder. You will note that within the references DWG existing folder, that is where the data shortcuts, where the surface resides for the existing ground for the data shortcuts. And within the proposed, that is where the data shortcut files or the drawing files that are being data shortcutted for your corridors, for your alignments, for your pipe networks. The GIS, the references GIS folder contains all the shape files and SDF files that we utilize in the survey folder, in the survey course. The Ascent project templates that are used to set up data shortcuts folders, I moved that into the Ascent config folders. And the documents and plans that I introduced in the 2021 data set, that is a direct reflection of what is happening in BIM 360. As you're probably very well aware that BIM 360 in November of last year introduced a design collaboration for civil, including Civil 3D. So Civil 3D has taken a major step forward with regard to BIM 360 and online collaboration. So within BIM 360, you will see that we have a plans folder as well as a documents folder, and those are reflected in my 2021 data sets. The plans folder within BIM 360, that is where your final drawings reside. They can be actually either DWG with your various base plans referenced into that. They can be DWF files of your final drawings or PDF files. And the documents folder, that basically contains all your non-drawings, all your non-Civil 3D objects, such as reports, Gantt charts, spreadsheets, specs, perhaps photographs, all sorts of documents that are non-DWG. Within my 2021 data sets for all the courses, even though we have a documents folder, we really don't use them in the course at all. They are just there for the students to realize that, oh, this is where all of these other documents would go, and they are reflected in BIM 360 accordingly. So the folder structure for the fundamentals course all reside within the Civil 3D projects directly off of the C drive. For the land development course, Civil 3D Fundamentals for Land Development, it is the same folder structure. However, it goes into a different folder. The folder for that is Civil 3D for Land Dev, and it is the same folder structure. The same for Civil 3D Fundamentals for Surveyors. All of those files will go into a Civil 3D for Surveyors folder, and you see that it is the same folder structure. Now within this one, the survey databases takes on a major role. And for example, all the raw data files that we use in the surveyors course, they reside in the survey databases data folders. And you see that there's some folders there for the different chapters. So the working folders are all of these three contain the working folder, but obviously the folders within the working folder are different, pertinent to each individual course. So I'm maintaining the same structure for all Civil 3D 2021 courses, again, to get the students familiar with a more professional workflow where the various drawings and documents need to reside in a project. So for the practice files, all along we could go to, we had the practice files residing somewhere on our website that you could download. They are now zip files rather than self-executing files. The reason for that is a lot of virus protection software would not allow the EXEs to come in, or would allow, if you did bring them in, you had to do a variety of things to extract them. So we just simplified the whole thing and made them zip files that you can download. So when you unzip these files, make sure that they get unzipped directly to the C drive, and then they will go into these folders. They will create these folder structures that we just looked at: Civil 3D projects, land developers, and surveyors automatically. For the fundamentals course and the survey course, there's actually two downloads. One is for the data set, and the other one is for the point cloud. Now, both of these courses, fundamentals and survey, do get into the point clouds. However, in both courses, I moved the point cloud into the appendix. And it is the same point cloud that we've been using for the last X amount of years. It's the Quarry Parks RCS file. And I have always noticed that when I was on your side of the fence, when I was downloading the data set, it seemed like 2/3 of the data set was actually that big point cloud itself. So if you're not planning on teaching the point clouds that are in the appendix, or if you already have the Quarry RCS file, you don't need to download the point cloud again. If you do have it, you can just place it into the point cloud folder of the references. Okay. So now for the changes that I did in the chapter reorganization of the fundamentals course, you'll see over here on the left, prior to 2021, and the breakdown of the courses, chapters 1 through 12, along with the appendix. And now the 2021 and the changes that I made. So chapter 1 is still the same. I did take quite a lot out of chapter 1 with regard to building styles and label styles and attaching these different templates, and I moved them to the project management chapter. So chapter 1 isn't nearly as complex as it used to be. And then what I did is, again, mimicking a standard workflow for a project, we always start with a survey, or in most cases. So what I did is I moved the survey that was broken up over two parts in previously, I moved that directly into chapter 2 because we gather a survey. And then once the survey is gathered, then typically we generate a surface. So the surface got moved up to chapter 3. And so that we see that day 1 accumulates with creating our existing conditions. Then for chapter 2, after we have our existing conditions created, we typically go into the design development stage. And at that point, we need to set up data shortcuts. We need to set up XREFs. And so therefore, I move the project management, where we do set up the data shortcuts, I move that into the very first part of of day 2. And now we are ready for the design development stage. And I moved the parcels chapter down into right as the first part of the design development. And after that, the alignments, profiles, corridors, and grading, that flow is more or less the same as it was in prior to 2021. One thing I did do is prior to 2021, the corridors was actually broken up between chapter 8 and chapter 11, whereas chapter 11 contained sections and material takeoff of the corridors. I always felt uncomfortable with that, so I'm moving it all together. So those parts of chapter 11 got moved up into chapter 8. Not the sections themselves, but I did more work on the section editor of the corridor. And we also perform material takeoff, excuse me, within chapter 8. The grading chapter still is meager as it always has been. I boosted it up a little bit more, but we have always known that the grading was one of the weakest parts of that course, primarily because there's only so much that we can squeeze into 4 days, and we do have the other fundamentals course on grading to complement that. I shouldn't say that. It's not. That's a major misconception. The grading course that I'll be discussing shortly does not complement this course, so strike that. It is a fundamentals course, the same level as this fundamentals course, but it focuses on grading for land development. The pipe networks, I expanded the pressure pipes, so there's a little bit more within the pressure pipes. The plan production, I moved that to up to chapter 11 rather than chapter 12. Again, previously, it was the sheet set manager, the sheet set manager properties and all that was pretty hard to get through. It was pretty hard to get your mind around that. And it was just so tough ending the 4-day course with the sheet set manager properties. So what I did is I moved that up to chapter 11. And I also, within the sheet sets, within the plan production, I introduced sections for the plan production so that the sections become part of your sheet set. And then chapter 12, this is where I moved the QTO quantity takeoff, where I introduced the linear and area takeoffs. And I also added a visualization tool. So that is where we get into taking the multi-view blocks, for example, the building footprints and the trees and some light standards, and we plop those into our Civil 3D surface and have them raised to the existing to the finished ground. So it's a lot of, I think it's a lot of fun, and it provides the students a positive note to accumulate the 4 days with. And as I mentioned, within the appendix, we do have the point cloud and the 3D solids of the surface. So overall, this generates a more realistic project workflow. We start by establishing our existing conditions. We set up the project for project management. We go through our design development. Then we produce the sheets. And at the very end, we do some quantity takeoffs of miscellaneous objects, as well as prepare our files for visually rich visualization. For the Civil 3D fundamentals for survey, I didn't reorganize the chapters within for 2021. It's the same flow as 2020. However, if you haven't taught 2020, in 2020 I introduced a lot of changes in the workflow. So I would recommend, if you haven't taught 2020 yet, to make sure that you understand that there's a lot of difference between 2019 and 2020. From 2020 to 2021, not much has changed. I added a section on the traverse editing, and I also redid the entire data set. You may have encountered this before, where a lot of the figures within the survey database didn't graphically line up with the drawing elements within the drawing. That had to do with old coordinate systems not translating very well. So I redid the data set to fix that error. For what was used to be known as the grading book, that we renamed to 2021 Fundamentals for Land Developers. That's quite a mouthful. Again, I didn't change any of the, I didn't reorganize any of the chapters. I did a few tweaks here and there, and I changed the title to make so that it's clear that this is a fundamentals level course focusing on grading for land developers as to compare to roadside grading, and that there is quite a lot of overlap between the fundamentals course and this grading course. The last chapter, again, last year I did some major reorganization, and the last chapter in this book deals with Infraworks. And as you may know, that the Infraworks 2021 has a completely different interface to it than the Infraworks 2020. So there's going to be a lot of changes within that as well. And speaking of Infraworks, as I said, there is a new interface, and there will actually be a new start screen in Infraworks 2021.1, which is very similar to the start screen within Civil 3D, where you can browse out to BIM 360, or you can launch files from your own network. We are going to be combining the two courses that we had previously. One was the fundamentals for conceptual design and visualization, another mouthful, as well as the engineering design. We're combining them into a 3-day course, which is your Infraworks 2021 fundamentals course. The reason we had two separate books initially was that you may recall that the engineering tools within Infraworks, the road design, the bridge design, and the waterworks, they used to be additional add-ins to the Infraworks program that you had to pay for. So therefore, we had two separate courses. Now that it's all one, there's no more reason to have two separate courses. So we're making the two 2-day courses into a 1 3-day course. It's going to be a lot of work, as well as the interface change. So again, this is not yet official. This is still in beta, but it looks very much like they're going to be going ahead with this. And it is such a fundamental change that I'm seriously considering introducing this in my Infraworks book. So you'll see that this is the, on the right, you see the Civil 3D 2021 start screen. And on the left, the proposed Infraworks that I got out of the sandbox. And you see it's very, very similar, where we can browse to BIM 360 projects. We can launch our own recent files. And on the left, you'll see we have a direct access into the model builder itself. For Navisworks, which is due out in October, there's not much new that in the Navisworks 2021 software. However, there were some topics missing, I felt, in our existing using Autodesk Navisworks in a BIM workflow book. Those were quantifications, rendering, and scripting. What scripting in Navisworks is, I think it's really cool. As you walk around the Navisworks model and you approach a door, you can script it so that if you get within a certain radius of the door will automatically open up, either hinge open or slide open, depending on how you script it. As you walk through the door and you exit the radius of influence of that door, then the door will reverse and it will close. And that's scripting. I think it's a really cool feature, and so I would like to introduce that. So the three new chapters, quantification, rendering, and scripting, that I'm pondering adding to the course. I'm not sure if they're essential enough to be in this book. Should they go into an appendix, or should they be an integral part of the overall course? And if so, it would probably mean that it would be a third day rather than the 2-day course. And we'd love to hear feedback from our customers. So let me know what you think about, well, everything that I just talked about, but in particular, what you think about combining the two Infraworks courses into one book, as well as what you think about adding these components to our existing 2021 Navisworks course. So we looked at the differences in the file structure of the data set within the three fundamental level courses of Civil 3D, Fundamentals, Survey, and Grading. For the Fundamentals course itself, we looked at the course flow changes to reflect a more realistic workflow within Civil 3D projects. There were minor changes within the survey and the grading in quotation marks courses. And we also looked at what to expect from the upcoming Infraworks and Navisworks courses.